Thank you. And I think it's an appropriate also transition because you already started to talk a little bit about how you then, in a Whirlpool context, start to approach some of the challenges that are associated with managing the innovation pipeline, with managing innovation. And I think because, at least from the outside, and this is my impression, because Whirlpool is not in a technology industry. I mean, we know that a lot of innovative companies, we find them in technology industries because if you're not innovative there, you die. I mean, if you are having search engine things, you need to develop new applications. If you have mobile phones, you need to be technology leader, technology innovator, and all these kind of things. But in household appliances, it doesn't necessarily come so natural to say that it's necessary to be innovative in order to be competitive in these issues. And therefore it's very interesting, I mean, from the outside, to have looked a little bit on Whirlpool's history over the last 10 years, because it's almost 10 years, I think, since Nancy Snyder was announced Vice President for Innovation. There was a new innovation strategy in Whirlpool stemming from the headquarters, throwing out to probably, I mean, the period you talked about when they took the innovators outside their normal jobs and so on. And I think it would be really interesting if you could maybe try to share with me and with our audience a little bit of the experience linked to these 10 years of managing innovation, the attempts to overcome some of the traditional difficulties in managing the innovation pipeline within Whirlpool. I think the microphone just dropped. We will have maybe a technician will come. Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Well, the journey has been indeed started in 2000 with a big bang. The CEO at that time decided that it was really necessary because of our industry to significantly change our investment and our capability on innovation. It is true that our industry is probably perceived as a lower tech, less sexy industry, but because of the high capital intensity, because of the endemic overcapacity, because of the significant fragmentation of the distribution channels, and the ongoing, let me say, developments of new competition, the industry is working since a long time with relatively low margins, in the digits, let's say, around the world, with some notable exceptions. The company has been around, Whirlpool in this specific case, but also some of the other key competitors, for more than 100 years, really honing in on the specific skill of serving these home appliance needs of consumers around the world with its brands. And so it's true that the outcome of most of the innovations has been the ability to provide a superior value proposition to consumers. You know, to make the point very clear, it was maybe probably 50, 60 years ago in Italy that in order to buy a refrigerator, the average Italian would have to spend 6 months of its average Italian salary in the 50s and 60s, more or less. Today, the same refrigerator, in terms of the average number of hours worked, it's about 6 hours. So the value equation has completely changed comparing, for instance, to cars. This is not happening the same way, for sure. At the same time, our ability to create margins is really coming from our constant innovation. We call it small innovation, we call it big innovation. The level of innovation is on various dimensions, and we always define it to compare to our competitors. So our ability to define innovation in a very specific way is what has made the effort very clear within the company from the very beginning. Innovation was defined as a superior consumer solution, so in the consumer's eyes, first of all, as something that is able to provide a sustainable competitive advantage, And the third criteria for our definition is that generates superior shareholder return. So these are the three variables that have been made operational in a very specific way, and it's the way we monitor, measure, and set goals for innovation. What has happened since the very beginning is that over time, the company has really, we use this word, embedded innovation processes inside the rest of the company, inside of the rest of the process, from product development to the definition objectives, to people management, talent management, to the definition of the leadership model for Whirlpool and so on. So over the course of the last 10 years, many efforts have been made to keep raising the game of innovation within Whirlpool and making the innovation efforts as much as part of the fabric as possible.
So the example you mentioned before, the initial example with taking employees outside their existing context
Jobs.
and assigning them specific innovation responsibilities is not, it's not to be understood as a delegation of responsibility of innovation to a limited group of people. Because from an organizational point of view, and it's something we like to do research on, from an organizational point of view, you can manage the innovation or the responsibility of innovation. You can manage in different ways. You can say, okay, innovation in our company is the responsibility of R&D. So you say, okay, R&D, you are 10 people in R&D or 100 people in R&D. You are responsible for churning out new ideas for new products, turning it into things. Other companies outsource the innovation. They ask Design Continuum, IDEO, the guys from Apple, they incite them in and say, okay, help us innovate. Other people again, other organizations again, use ad hoc venture groups and so on. So the organization, so when you talk about an attempt to embed innovation processes into the organizational fabric, how does that relate to the fact that you identified very early a limited amount of people that had responsibility of innovation?
This was a tactic that was used at the beginning to kick off the effort, to make it very visible and, let me say, to jumpstart it. Was a technique that gave certain results, particularly, as I said, in terms of establishing the first steps of developing the capability. Since then, and this was a mandate that was given, let me say, as a blank sheet of paper to these original 75 people, the process has become more structured. And so in the last, let me say, 7-8 years, the sandbox of innovation has become much clearer. You know, as a company, we have defined our, let me say, what we call strategic direction in 3 areas. We want to innovate in the core business, our typical, products that people know, in the extension of this core business. These are all the accessories, services that are related but are different from the core appliance business. And then going above and beyond this into new categories. Could be small appliances, could be new businesses, could be solutions like we had in the last few years for a totally different room of the house, which is the garage. So the organization of the garage is a totally new business venture within the company, which is coming to Europe as well, was started in the US. Well, when you innovate in the core, when you innovate in the extension of the core, when you innovate outside of the core, the set of rules do change. And we see that we are more successful, honestly, if we leverage the diversity of our workforce, particularly when we're trying to innovate in the new areas which are far away from the core business. So over time, this practice and this discipline has evolved, and the way we deal with it is different depending on the type of innovation that we're looking for.
Okay. I'll try to keep track a little bit of your answers, but I would also like, because we are receiving now some questions from the audience, and I'd like to maybe integrate.
How about you?
Okay. I'd like maybe to integrate some of the questions to what you were saying. One of them is specifically pertinent to your measurement or your definition of information or of innovation, which is linked to how you actually estimate. So you mentioned that you define innovation as something that is linked to customers, but also something that can create superior shareholder return. And we have very crisp question from the audience saying, how do you actually measure shareholder return in an early stage of a development project?
It's a very good question. Again, it's a very broad question, and I don't have an answer like a bullet. It depends, as consultants would say, from the type of idea that we are assessing. If it's an idea which is replacing an existing business and maybe improving a part of the business proposition, let me say, it's not particularly difficult to assess it. A completely different challenge is to evaluate a new product category, something that has not been seen before, that is opening up a totally new business idea or a new solution for a consumer. In that case, it's much more difficult. One perspective I can offer is the following. One tool of the innovation toolkit that has been developed within Whirlpool is the idea of a migration path. A migration path is describing not a specific idea, but a set of ideas that all combined can create a differentiated proposition for consumers. So this would be something that maybe would give a benefit in year one, but also something that would be developed in the second year and the third year, that at the end maybe of a long journey that could be 5-10 years would completely change your experience of, let's say a washing machine. So a migration path for the evolution of a washing machine. When you evaluate an idea within a migration path, not necessarily the value of a specific idea is the most relevant thing to assess, but it's more the consistency within a path that it's important. So sometimes you have to have a very specific way to assess the shareholder return for the idea, because maybe it's a standalone idea, you have to decide to invest in this one or in something completely different. Other times, it's more important the consistency of the idea with, as I said, the migration path. In that case, is the overall value of the proposition of the space which is relevant. And in that case, it's so much more important the consistent with the strategy of the company, with the business logic that you are after, which is important.